To me, one of the most tragic aspects of film is how hard it is to see movies as they were meant to be seen, because they were designed for cinemas, a business model that inherently makes every release a limited one. If you missed your chance, well, that's an experience you will now never properly have. The closest you could get was a home media release. In the past, these were often far cries from how the film was intended, not just because of the low quality, but often these were hasty re-edits, pan and scan, which would crop the film and pan across the shot in an attempt to fit 4:3 screens. To some degree then, remasters make sense, in a vacuum. I'm not here to litigate the quality of any particular remaster, God knows there are an infinite number of terrible ones, just that as an idea, it makes sense. As the technology powering at-home viewing advanced, we could hypothetically get an experience closer to what was intended. That's the key point though with HD re-releases. There was always a high-quality version. There was a time where you could go into cinemas and see the crisp, beautiful imagery from your favorite films, provided that it was a good cinema and had proper equipment, and there's actually a lot of factors in picture quality. Regardless, basically, none of that applies to video games. For the past year on this channel, I've spent a lot of time talking about remakes. It's become one of the things I'm known for. However, after the last video, I made a bit of a promise to never speak about them again, so I won't. I have spent far too long talking about Resident Evil 4 and its remilk, so I'm going to talk about neither. Instead, I'm going to talk about the heavily related topic of remasters. When I say remaster, what am I talking about? I'm talking about games that are fundamentally the same as the original, but with noticeable changes. A remake to me is generally a new game using the old game's name. They can be very close, but they are just kind of made of different stuff. As an example, Resident Evil on the GameCube is a remake. It is a new game using old ideas, where something like Twilight Princess HD is a remaster. Controversially, I would also consider shot-for-shot games to be remasters, because they're so incredibly similar, they might as well be. This is where you get games like Ocarina of Time 3D, which may technically be a remake, but is so close that it's hard to consider it an entirely new game. Okay, so why am I talking about this? Well, let me just be a bit blunt here and say it's because I strongly dislike remasters. I know I'm not alone in this, but I feel like the topic hasn't been properly dissected, at least not the way I think it deserves to be. I want to make something very clear, that I am not trying to attack you. I have enjoyed remasters in the past. Remasters are often built off of phenomenal games, and typically they're the most accessible versions. If you fell in love with a game through a HD remaster, I get it. I don't think you're dumb for liking them. This isn't about me, this isn't about you, it's about an ideology. As an amateur game developer myself, I'm worried about how the ways we talk about games, how we think about them, is leading us towards a very stale and limited future for the most creative and free medium there is. And I want to talk about that. So let's do that. Let's talk about it now. For as long as games have been around, the medium has been locked in a never-ending technological race to create the absolute bestest graphics. From a marketing standpoint, advanced visuals make a lot of sense. I don't need to tell you that visuals are the first things that you see. With your eyes, or I don't know you. They're the most immediately impressive thing. The easiest message to convey about the quality of your game. As a result, especially from the 5th generation onwards, so much attention, time, and effort has been put into making the most state-of-the-art graphics scene yet. I find a lot of the discussion and criticism around graphics to be fairly unhelpful. Often, critics split games into separate components instead of looking at them as whole works. Graphics, gameplay, and story are often spoken about like they exist apart from each other and are to be criticized individually. Great story, but those graphics are pretty dated. I feel this sort of thinking is part of what allows remasters to be so normalized, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Another aspect of criticism I'm not really going to engage with is saying games have to be one way or another. I don't think games ever need to change the way they look to meet modern standards, but I also don't think those modern standards are inherently bad like a lot of my fellow pretentious contrarians do. While I definitely think modern games have gotten more and more aesthetically bland and uninteresting, I don't think it means realism and high-fidelity visuals are automatically soulless. I've spoken about this before, but certain games absolutely benefit from advanced graphics. I feel spectacle is often undervalued in criticism. I think being shown a bunch of cool-looking shit is good, actually. Getting into a fight may already be mechanically satisfying, but when you see the destruction it is causing, when you see the dust you're kicking up and the bright colorful explosions, it creates an even more engaging encounter. With the way some talk, you'd expect to be able to strip games down to just their raw mechanics, grey squares and grey levels, and still have an equally engaging time. This just isn't the case. The aesthetics of a game, the way it looks and sounds, who you are playing as, are just as important to the overall experience as the gameplay itself is. When you mess with any of these aspects, you have created something new. It's very easy to criticize remasters when they obviously fuck up, when they go in the wrong direction or end up looking objectively worse than the originals. If remasters are criticized at all, it is generally on these grounds: that the upgrade wasn't big enough, or maybe the game is overpriced, or the changes aren't the right ones to make. Generally speaking, that's it. It seems like the base assumption most hold is that remasters are something you can do correctly. That while many, maybe even most, remasters suck ass and balls, there is still an ideal scenario where it can work, where it can improve a game. It's this that I fundamentally disagree with. It seems we are so often eager to replace art. So many of us seem ready to throw away what we claim to love in favor of something newer and shinier, even if we don't realize it. The same ideology that drives the corporate remasters we claim to hate can actually be found everywhere across the medium, but we'll get to that. I previously mentioned how important each aspect of a game is, that despite how some of us act, they are not separate and interchangeable. A game is informed by everything within it. I understand to many of you this may seem really obvious, but you'd be surprised. Let's look at Wind Waker as an example. Wind Waker HD may appear to be fundamentally the same game. The mechanics, the physics, the written narrative are all as they've always been. However, the tens of images you are blasting into your eyes every single second are very different. Wind Waker HD's lighting and color are quite different, which has some pretty major implications. Wind Waker was designed to be evocative of anime the creators watched as children. It is very deliberate in everything it does. HD, on the other hand, just by its very nature, comes in and fucks all of that up. Without even looking at how the new visuals affect any specific location's atmosphere, we are already disconnected from the intent of the game. These ideas, the influences the game had, are not being communicated to you anymore. It is now a different experience, despite having the same core. It's also in widescreen. I don't think there's any tool quite as disrespected as the aspect ratio. Despite the fact that the way you frame an image is actually quite important, it seems as though people just treat aspect ratios as a nuisance at best. It is often assumed that 4:3 is a relic of the past and not a perfectly viable and subjectively better aspect ratio for many works. It's the reverse pan and scan problem. I assume because you aren't losing visual information, people think it's perfectly fine to change the composition of a shot. If Wind Waker wanted to be 16:9, it could have been. Fuck, I was supposed to talk about that game. It's remasters like these that reinforce the entirely false idea that just because something is newer, that means it's better. 16:9 is the new standard, so therefore any works that don't meet it have aged. I find it shocking how common this issue is. How many people are unwilling to play games outside of their specific desired aspect ratio? This need to match arbitrary standards can genuinely ruin some games. Resident Evil was remilked in 2002. It's truly a shame because I think it's one of the best survival horror games ever made. It just would have been nicer if that effort and design philosophy went into something new. Regardless, Resident Evil 2002 is a phenomenal game, and one of its strongest aspects is its potent horror atmosphere. This is achieved both from smart environmental design, but also well thought out shots that show you just enough so that you can play, but never get too comfortable. It's a great case study in the strength of fixed camera games. Also, it just looks fucking cool. The shots are visually interesting enough to stand on their own as well-crafted images, separate from the role they play in the actual game. It's a really good game. You should play it. On GameCube, Resident Evil Remastered is a bit of an infamous example for weirdos like me. See, despite the fact that everything was pre-rendered and designed around 4x3. I can't deal with black bars for some reason. So they cropped it, and it looks so fucking bad. The game is now constantly panning to try fit all the information in the frame, quite literally replicating the pan and scan problem that movies face. Not to mention how much worse the entire game looks. I didn't want to just complain that certain remasters look bad. That's really easy. Plenty of other people can do that. But Jesus Christ. Characters stand out far more against the backgrounds now because they're being rendered in HD on top of low resolution JPEGs. They have seemingly tweaked the lighting, and in some cases it does help with blending. An issue the original game didn't have at all, mind you. This is because unlike Resident Evil 0, the backgrounds were not re-rendered in HD. Instead, they were upscaled. Now, I don't like either solution. The real option is to just have the game run at 480 like God intended. Resolution is another weird sticking point people have. While it is true that old games looked a hell of a lot smoother on CRT screens, it really just meant they were blurrier, not crisper. Upping the resolution only takes away from the experience in a way we'll get into properly later, but for now, just take Resident Evil's low-res pan and scanned backgrounds as a clear example of how modernizing a game's visuals can really ruin it. Can always get worse though. While I do think the remaster absolutely butchered the game's looks, it's still pretty good. There is still the strong visual design at its core. What is genuinely just shit though? The controls. The remaster comes with modernized controls that are, and I mean this with no exaggeration, bumcrap from a poo ass. I'm not entirely sure where this came from, but the dislike towards tank controls is always very odd to me. I even see people say that it's specifically the combination of tank controls and fixed cameras that is the problem, implying that they aren't designed to go together. I need to stress this part, it's quite important. Tank controls are the only controls for fixed camera games. They are set up that way so that forward is always the same regardless of the way the camera is facing. Now with so-called modern controls, it's instead based around the camera. The issue is that in this game, the camera can change mid-room. At that point, your directions are flipped. You can start walking forward by holding down on the stick, and within the exact same room, down now means backwards because the camera is behind you. The game tries to compensate by having it so that if you hold the direction through a camera change, it will continue to work as it did before. But if you stop or so much as drift the stick slightly in any other direction, suddenly you're going to unnaturally zip around and go back the opposite way. For some reason, it's weirdly common to respond that tank controls are bad because real humans don't move like tanks. Okay? Chris Redfield isn't real, I hope.
I'm real.
Also, just putting it out there, looking at these two side by side, which do you think is more feasible for a person to do? Even if Resident Evil's implementation of modern controls was flawless, why are we doing this in the first place? It's a real if it ain't broke kind of deal, I think. So what's going on? Well, remember how I said people are often under the false impression that visuals have progressed linearly. That extends to game design as a whole. As I said prior, tank controls make a whole lot of sense in fixed camera games. Yet, they are seen as old, outdated, a thing of the past. There seems to be this idea that developers in 1996 didn't know how to make a more fluid and responsive 3D game. This was the only idea they got until they eventually figured it out. Which, you know, no, plenty of games released that same year that had controls we'd consider more intuitive. Also, subsequent games in the series would continue to have tank controls even though it wasn't the industry standard anymore. I wonder why. While it's true that Resident Evil is a game kind of born out of limitations, the game works very well within those limitations, and it's clear a lot of thought went into it. Yes, it was limited, but the tank controls and fixed camera angles aren't just some accident that happened to work out well. It just feels extremely disrespectful to look at such a well-designed work and think, well, it needs to control like every other generic third-person game ever made, just because there's a new standard. So everything has to change to meet it, rather than you changing to meet the game. Ask someone why a game is bad, and often they'll tell you why it's hard. Or more accurately, why it's frustrating. For some reason, there's a very common idea that games need to be as frictionless as possible, and if games put up any resistance to the player, that means they're poorly designed and outdated. With a few special golden boy exceptions, essentially just Souls-likes and the occasional indie game, they get to be bastards and have unfun moments because we decided they were the ones that could. When they do it, they're smart. When other games do it, they need a remake now. At least a remake would be something kinda new. Instead, we have the quality of life features. These are pretty common in remasters, and what they aim to do is essentially sand off any of the rough edges a game might have, because God forbid you have to try. When I think quality of life, the Swift Sail comes to mind. The Swift Sail is an item in Wind Waker that's main purpose is letting you play less Wind Waker. It cuts down on the amount of sailing by quite a bit. It kinda sucks. Wind Waker's sailing is a pretty poor part of the experience. Does that mean it's always fun and intuitive? No, but you're navigating the ocean and communicating with the gods to aid you. Why should it always be fun? However, people can't imagine things like this as a feature, only a bug. The vastness of the ocean cannot be a strength, it has to be a weakness because it isn't instantly gratifying, it's not immediately rewarding, it's kinda awkward, it's a little bit dull sometimes. But it's Wind Waker. That's what the game is. Your boat, the ocean, and the wind. That sense of adventure. The Swift Sail breaks the illusion that these are distant lands you're exploring. It all but removes one of the core mechanics. You know, the wind? The sail just magics some wind behind you. It just sucks to see people treat something like this as though it is an objective improvement, just because it's a bit more user-friendly. The Zelda remasters do this quite a bit. Even minor shit like reducing the number of shadow insects in Twilight Princess. Was it really that big a deal, guys? I just believe this form of thinking reduces what games can be, reduces the amount of emotions they're allowed to produce. Remastering is therefore a form of erasure. If we treat them as the definitive versions, then we deprive people of unique experiences. They'll only play the safer version, the one that feels more familiar, just that bit nicer to them. You may think I care a lot about creator intention, that this is about playing games as the people who worked on them intended, experiencing their vision. No. For one, we constantly overestimate the role of figureheads in the creative process, treat works as if they're the product of a sole creator's vision, when that is often far from the case. Games are typically the combination of lots of people's different visions. Often the games that release don't match anyone's due to a number of different factors. I care about the games, what the actual works themselves are, how they function, what they say. Even in a perfect world where all the same people get to have a second go at their passion project game, I would still think it was a bit shit. It could hypothetically be interesting, but a lot of the time all it would do is produce a different work with less of the grit the original had that's just wearing the old game's skin. No game fits this anxiety better, and no director fits this better than Majora's Mask and Aonuma. Majora's Mask was Aonuma's first proper role as director. That is a scary position, especially with the infamously low development time they were offered. Majora's Mask is not a game born out of ideal circumstances, far from it. I'm sure any artist can relate somewhat. The limitations, the stress, and being in a dark place and creating something you're just not proud of. It almost feels justified then. The Majora's Mask team were fucked over so heavily they deserve another go. The game deserves a second chance. Maybe it'll do things it never could before, and the opportunity was granted. And he ruined it. Majora's Mask 3D is a terrible game. It's competent, it functions fine, and if you played it without knowing any better, you'd probably have a good time. It's just that it's quite possibly the most disrespectful game I've ever played. It spits on the original. In essence, it takes the single most interesting Nintendo 64 game and makes it as safe as it can. Holds your hand when it can. It removes as much friction as possible. Removes freedom, because with freedom, sometimes the player will be uncertain. We can't have that. We can't have anything too interesting. Shoot here, stab here, go here at this time. It cannot handle the fact that sometimes the game was uncomfortable, that it wasn't traditionally beautiful, that the world was kind of unpleasant. It modernizes everything, but doesn't even have the bravery to be an entirely new game. It is still the same core. I understand that I'm kind of doing the thing right now. Aonuma is not solely responsible for this game. That would be silly. But he was the one to go on and make a giant list of everything wrong. Everything he was insecure about in regards to the original game, because he doesn't understand Majora's Mask, and how could he? This is why I just don't really care what creators want, what they intended it to be, what they'd make instead if they could. You should learn to live with your mistakes. Let that little drop of humanity and game history stay immortalized instead of trying to cover it up with something more polished. Learn from those failures, but not so you can try replace what already exists, so that you can make something new. Something you can be proud of. With everything we've spoken about so far, one game really comes to mind. One that encapsulates essentially everything. But I can't talk about it. So I'm going to talk about a different game instead. One that hasn't been remade or remastered or anything like that, yet I still think is really relevant. Drakengard was the best game I played last year, and nothing even came close. It is by far the best PS2 game. Fuck you, Shadow of the Colossus. I'm kidding. Kinda. Also, minor Drakengard spoilers. It'll be fine though, just watch. Come on. I want money, come on, let me have it, give me the watch time. Drakengard is a great case study in how games are informed by absolutely everything within them. If you mess with anything, it would completely throw it off balance. It's not the easiest game to describe, at least not within a video like this. Essentially, it is the combination of two over-the-top action-heavy genres. But rather than creating the ultimate action game, it's just kinda off. This is very deliberate. The controls and mechanics aren't exactly the most fluid and satisfying. It is a game all about killing, all about violence, yet that violence isn't the most gratifying. The clunkiness of it is manageable in short bursts, and you can probably get through a big chunk of the game without truly feeling the effects of it, because you're constantly switching from the ground to the air and vice versa, keeping it somewhat fresh. Eventually though, you will hit a difficulty spike and have to grind. And that is when Drakengard truly shows its hand. Suddenly, many of the design decisions make a lot of sense, as you do nothing but mow down anonymous enemy soldier after anonymous enemy soldier. The environments really help in this regard. There is something about such sparsely decorated wastelands that I find that the 6th generation really excels at capturing. I love this tree so much, and honestly, I don't think I have any fancy video essayist words to explain why. There are so many standouts, like the unbelievably gloomy woods, or my personal favorite, which is the silhouettes of these Cyclops corpses that hang over the final battle. Now, I am misrepresenting the game a little bit here. I'm sure I'm showing you some atmospheric walks through vast areas, probably playing Twilight Princess music or something to really sell the effect, but that's not what Drakengard is like. That's not what Drakengard sounds like. It sounds like this. You might not think this is anything, but imagine listening to this on loop in a grey wasteland as you kill hundreds of people over and over and over using the same fucking combo attack countless times. Everything. The world, the movement, the combat, the music, all contributes to this mind-melting feeling. A genuinely draining experience, and it's so fucking good. For me at least, the 2 difficulty spikes I experienced were perfectly placed, forcing me to do a bunch of mind-numbing grinding, making sure I felt sufficiently mentally drained before the game would proceed to go completely off the fucking rails. And it only gets worse as it falls further into depravity and misery, yet that gameplay loop never changes. I could go on and on about the game, but the point is, when I was looking for that phenomenally uncomfortable soundtrack, I stumbled upon so many comments hoping and begging for a remake, a remaster, anything. Which leads to insane statements where people say shit like, man, this is the best game ever, can't wait for the remaster. If it's the best game ever, then why does it need a... What? Has this ever happened to you?
Oh my god, I've woken up on some sort of fucking island and I don't even really know what's going on. Oh, if only there was some way that I could possibly get some help.
That's great. You need to join the Kai's Home for Aspiring Vampires server. What? You can send text, images, maybe a cheeky little bit of sound. Listen to this.
Oh!
What is that sound, man? Oh my god. Call your friends. Who needs a phone when you have the Kaizo First Party Vampires community server? Oh! We have such great features. Amazing emotes. Fun commands.
Carl, help me find land. Carl, bet my father. Tropically.
Don't believe me because you're a cold-hearted piece of shit? Okay, fine. Just listen to these glowing reviews. Why is he on the ground? Oh my god, is he dead? Is that still not enough for you? Is that still not fucking enough for you? Okay, fine. Well, you're in fucking luck, asshole. Okay, picture this. You have money? Alright, now imagine a world where I had it instead. Patreon. Check it out. Starting at $1 a month. What? But if you want to pay a little bit more, pay a little bit extra, you can get a whole bunch of cool shit. Behind the scenes stuff. Concept art, woo, and video previews way before the video comes out. So go on, pick a tier. Come on, we don't call it a day. Come on, go check out the website. Come on. Look, man, we only got one life. Are you really gonna go through your entire life without ever having given me money? Imagine having that in your tombstone. What are you, fucking stupid? Hello. And welcome to the intermission. I haven't done one of these in a while. I don't think the last video had an intermission. So it means it's been a long time since the last one. And what we do here is just take a little bit of a mental break because these videos, they got a lot of stuff going on in them. They're not like super smart or anything. They're just quite dense with random stuff. This is also unfortunately where I do the tiniest bit of plugging. Sorry. And also look, I get it. I know it's the cringe lib millennial app. I'm well aware. I don't like that about it either, but I'm not going to use Twitter, so follow me on Blue Sky. It's a lot calmer. It's a lot calmer if you like actually listening to people. It's better. It's not good, but man, is it better. There's that. We also on this part of the show, we also do a little bit of fan art showcasing. Look at all that awesome shit that you're probably seeing with those goddamn eyes of yours. That's kind of the main stuff. So I hope you're enjoying that. If you can, giving me a follow would be nice. Also, the YouTube stuff that everybody pretends they don't care about. Everybody's like, oh man, it's so cringe that I want you to hit that bell. But I do. I'll be upfront with you. I want you to hit that bell because it benefits me directly.
Now let's talk about probably one of Nintendo's honestly fucking worst video games of all fucking time. That's right, we're talking about The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker, or as I like to call it, The Legend of Zelda Shit Wanker! This fucking piece of shit game is one of the worst games they've ever made. But it looks like a cartoon. And if there's the Triforce Quest, everyone always talks about how garbage the Triforce Quest is. And that is why I am so excited to be announcing the brand new Wii U console, the greatest console of all time. They are remaking it into The Legend of Zelda Wind Waker HD. Now this game is going to be really good, and Nintendo is actually taking out the Triforce Quest because they listen to their fans. I'm so excited to finally be able to play this game for the first time.
For whatever reason, I had convinced myself that the general public doesn't really like remasters. They don't hate them by any means, and often when they play them, they prefer them over the original. It's just not something they seek out specifically, something they beg for. I had assumed most people would be interested in something new, sequels at the very least. However, it seems like forever now, that actually isn't the case. People don't seem to think it's weird to love a game and at the same time prefer if it was transformed into a different game. When I say Drakengard would be worse as a remaster, I really mean it. Even small things. Like for this video, I decided to just up the resolution myself, and already it is an issue. Drakengard's fuzziness really works in its favor, and not because it hides graphical mistakes or whatever. No, instead it's because it's simply less clear. There's more for you to interpret what this world is actually like. It suggests more, with the high resolution instead, well, it's quite literal. There are less blanks for your brain to fill in. It doesn't suggest anything anymore, it just tells you what's there. The landscape is now inherently less interesting, less intriguing, less evocative, and that's just resolution. Many comments said shit like, great story, if only the gameplay was better. If you change the gameplay, try to make it smoother, more modern, less clunky, well then you ruin the story. The story is only as impactful and striking as it is because of the trials you as the player must endure to get there. All the pain and frustration and stupid fucking worm piece of shit fucking fuck. If you take it further, pretty up the graphics, then you're obviously losing the atmosphere. Who knows what else a remaster may consider too outdated, too difficult. One of the game's strongest aspects is the non-linearity of its story. You are constantly going back to do different things, and not in the normal way that typically manifests. That might be confusing though. It might be hard for people to tell what is actually going on, and when it's even happening. The cutscenes may be looked at as a relic of their time, despite the fact that they're, great. They're so theatrical. It genuinely resembles looking down at actors on a stage, which contributes to the surreality of everything. However, you know, that's kinda odd. That's not what games are like anymore. Maybe they should go for more standard cinematic cutscenes. That's a hell of a lot more accessible to modern players. It's not a huge deal. We'll keep the lore the same. That's what matters. The lore. That's all stories are now. Lore. Even small, strange details could be lost. The game takes place during a war. You have an army. You can hear them cry out for you, yet you can never fight alongside them. You are always alone. Even when you gain allies for your party, they just briefly replace you. The player is always alone. It was entirely possible for the PlayStation 2 to handle an army, but I can definitely see how someone could think this was a technological limitation. It is strange, it doesn't make any sense, and it looks outdated. What I'm saying is that any one of those changes would make the whole thing collapse. It wouldn't be Drakengard. And I am shocked at how often this happens. So much time and attention is given to fixing games. And you know, despite my pretensions, I get why. People want to have fun. People aren't always interested in challenging experiences. They aren't here to learn about games as a medium. They want to fucking shoot a zombie. And if shooting a zombie in one game is just that bit easier, just that bit more fun, why wouldn't they prefer that? That's what makes videos like this so hard to make. I don't want to come in here and tell you that you're an anti-art cuck just because you wanted to have a fun time playing a game. You know, that sucks. That makes me a dickhead. I just don't like the ideologies that underpin these works, that lead to this form of thinking. These strange, unproven truisms like that games can age. How? How can a game age? If it was good then, it's good now. While writing this, I stumbled upon a YouTube short, I know, of an absolute gamer boy getting very excited to play a Fallout New Vegas remaster, where he said something along the lines of,
Fallout New Vegas is considered the best Fallout of all time, but the gameplay has aged since 2010, so a remaster would be perfect.
2010? 2010? 2010? A lot of my issues with remasters stem from taking games from the 6th generation and before and trying to modernize them. Because to me, from the PlayStation 3 onwards, I mean, those are modern games. They're the exact fucking same as they are now, just slightly less monetized. However, nope, I'm behind on the times. Fallout New Vegas? Outdated! Port that shit to Unreal Engine this instant. I know I'm the games don't have to be one way person, but also you know, I too can acknowledge that modern game bad. I'm fully in support of realism being used in games when it benefits them. I do not believe every game would be better off simpler. However, you know, there is a point where it's a little bit much. I think the cutoff point was the PlayStation 4, a console that could do the realism of the PlayStation 3, but in a more flexible manner, more dynamic, more colorful. It sits in the perfect level of the uncanny valley. However, we keep marching on anyway. Games barely run now, are filled to the brim with stupid shit like DLSS and frame generation just to pretend they can actually work, and it's for nothing. The newer, fancier effects at best change visuals slightly. The simplest games need insanely high budgets and end up at 500 billion gigabytes. Fuck you. Here's the thing. While I am a realism defender, I don't really defend a lot of what comes with it. I defend the style, not the practice. 4K is a scam, and if you bought anything to display 8K, I think you might be a bit of a bellend. Realistic games would absolutely benefit from lower resolutions, for the obvious reasons. I love seeing shit like Red Dead 2 on a CRT. I even played Resident Evil 4 Remake on one. Fuck, I was supposed to talk about that game. These games feel much more real on these screens, because well, again, it's what I said earlier about suggestion. Realism and even resolution is a tool. Making it the most advanced is not the end goal of all video games. Why do we keep making HD remasters? Why do we keep upping the resolution when it only makes things worse? Only makes the consumer experience worse. Because they're now dealing with 60 gigabytes instead of 2. It is a deeply corporate nightmare. The fact they have found a way to resell you things you already like and own in a worse state that takes up more of your storage, more of your processing power, wasn't designed to be played like this. And yet, people will still buy it because it's the definitive edition. All because it now fits a more homogenized view of what games can even be. I just wish it ended at that. That this was an issue with one easy target. Big companies. Ubisoft, Nintendo, Rockstar, fuck them. While it absolutely stems from them, unfortunately, the ideology that allows remasters to even sell is quite pervasive, and sometimes invisible. No YouTuber wants to shit on the little guy. No good YouTuber wants to shit on the little guy. Plenty will, and then freak the fuck out when they realize they are now stuck in a perpetual, miserable drama vortex, even though it is entirely their own fault. Point is, I really don't want to shame anyone, but that doesn't make it good. A lot of the effort put into fixing games doesn't actually come from big companies. Corporate remasters don't come out mostly unchanged out of respect for the original, because God knows corporations have no idea what respect for art could even mean. Often they are just far too lazy and greedy to do anything too drastic with their remasters. No, instead, it's up to the fans to fix it. I want to preface this segment by saying that I love mods. However, so much of the talent found in the modding communities for games is centered around improvements. It is centered around fixing things. Graphical improvements, gameplay fixes, rebalances, making it a different game. And the thing is that modded games are still considered the game. Especially with RPGs like the Fallout series, you are just allowed to make it a different game and still say that you're playing New Vegas. What? It too contributes to the homogenization of games, as often modders buy into weird truisms of game design. Think about it. Say, free cameras. If your game doesn't have free cam, that means it's outdated. So games that were designed with a specific method of camera control in mind, like Ocarina of Time, just have it shoehorned in. Despite the game definitively not needing it, and it really isn't that hard to get used to. It is such a shame that so much time is put into kind of ruining games like this. The decompilation and recompilation projects are awesome and allow for some really cool stuff. Allow us to understand these games better and do silly things with them. However, their primary purpose for many seems to be running Ocarina of Time at 4K 240 FPS like some sort of freak. This sort of shit can only happen when you buy into the erroneous idea that more resolution means more or better. Which, I'm sorry, it's just nonsense and there is no actual reason for it. Another truism that seems to exist that we can see here is the idea that more frames per second is just automatically better, when I really don't think that's true. There is an argument to be made that certain games benefit from high frame rates. I'd agree. However, there is no reason to think games not designed for certain frame rates would be improved at all, or that 60 FPS should be the standard. Some of the best and most beloved games of all time do not hit 30 FPS. Ocarina of Time is a pretty famous example, running at 20, but that game is old and outdated and cringe. For a newer example, what about one of the best-selling and most critically acclaimed modern games of all time? Grand Theft Auto 5, when it released, across platforms ran at a cinematic frame rate most of the time. People complained about the frame rate, no doubt, but that's for frame drops, not the more stable 24 to, if you're lucky, 30 FPS. What I'm getting at is that a lot of the stuff we just say about video games doesn't seem to be all that true, like at all. The standards we hold games to often seem so arbitrary, and I don't know, man, it feels a bit up your own ass to constantly be trying to fix everyone else's games, that you know better or something. Again, I love mods.
Oh, hello.
He's gone. He's gone.
Hell, I even love graphics mods. I think they're really cool. I just don't like the narrative that they're better or sometimes essential. Because what does that even mean? Again, it typically just means more stock, more generic, better fitting the basic idea of what games are supposed to be now. It's genuinely like taking a book and just removing chapters from it and writing your own and saying, this is the definitive version of this book. I fixed it for you. Not all mods are like this, of course. There are a lot of restorations out there. Grand Theft Auto 4 has a notoriously bad PC port, but with mods you can restore a lot of what was lost. This is actually closer to a remaster than any of what we've talked about before. There was a version of Grand Theft Auto 4 that existed. Then they made a bad, inauthentic one, and then people came in and restored what was there. Got you closer to that original experience. Now you are more in conversation with the game, with what has been lost, with the emotions it is trying to make you feel, with the atmosphere it wants to present you. Or you could enable path tracing and have it look like shit and run even worse. These restorations are great but not perfect. It is better to play the original, but I fully understand not everyone can do that. That's one of the most tragic parts about remasters and their role as the definitive versions. Often it leads to the originals being lost, not being ported to modern systems because, well, why would they be? The better one is there, and we can make more money off of it. Often these games just aren't very accessible, where their fucked up soulless versions are. Not everyone can play these games the way they're supposed to be, and it's not their fault. Most of the time, it's the companies. I'm guilty of this too. My videos often use footage from the PC ports of games. This is because I'm not a full-time YouTuber, and the flexibility that PC offers for my channel is really valuable. I don't have to deal with capture cards and other roadblocks. Not only that, but often PC ports come with tools that are really valuable for video creators. My Resident Evil 4 footage has always been captured on PC because it is so much faster to teleport using RE tweaks to make sure I always have relevant B-roll quick and easy. Fuck, I wasn't supposed to talk about that game. Look, I get it. However, it doesn't make art replacement any less sad to me. When you start thinking like this, it eventually starts to kind of take over your mind a little bit. It's a real Ship of Theseus situation. What is the cutoff? What is just an acceptable port difference? What is a remaster? What should we care about here? What about game updates? Like Cyberpunk 2.0 that completely overhauls everything, but it's like the same game still, kinda? Oh god, what about controllers? Controllers absolutely change how a game feels. We're lucky nowadays that they're fairly standardized. Like, if you play an Xbox 360 game on a Switch 2 Pro controller, are you really missing out on anything? Probably a little, but like, who cares? Though this wasn't always the case. When games had more unique controllers, games were absolutely built around them. Take Sin and Punishment for Nintendo 64, or like any Wii game. The issue was far more exacerbated though between keyboard and controller, with them being very different, and the games designed for them never fully translating over. I find the refusal some people have towards one or the other to be the same as being stubbornly unwilling to learn tank controls. At some point, you need to just either accept that you're going to have to learn something new, or just play something else. Not every game is for you, and that's fine. Not every game is for me either. But I don't think we should be trying to contort games into our preferred shapes, only into what we are personally most comfortable with. It goes back to what has been repeated over and over in this video. This form of thinking limits what games can be. If they all have to be for everyone, and when they aren't we must change them, well then the safest bet is to make what everyone is already used to. However, again, this doesn't matter. Most people are just gonna play what they like. And if it's easy to do, they'll mod games so they like them more. There is nothing I can do about that. Obviously, do I wish people's attitudes were different? Sure, but this is how things are, and I'm not really here to change that. I view games differently than most people because life sucks and is stressful, and if you enjoy super modded Fallout or 60GB Kingdom Hearts, who the fuck am I to take that from you? It's just an interesting ideological separation between the gamers and pretentious pieces of shit like me, right? Like, people who care about games and doing proper criticism would never do this, right? They'd play the original game so that they can do fair critique, be in conversation with the game, so when they talk about it, they'll be talking about the right game. Right? I want to preface this by saying that this person has, at least in the past, seen my videos, and I follow them, and they often post real cool shit that I agree with, and they've been writing on games a lot longer than I have. So, if you do end up watching, this is very jovial, and don't take this as like a response or a debunking, just an interesting case study. But they played Half-Life with a controller. Now, if you're not super familiar with Half-Life, you might not get why that matters. I have essentially just said they played a video game with a controller and then started clutching my pearls. Half-Life is like the PC game. It is absolutely designed with the keyboard and mouse in mind, and a lot of the game's decisions only really make sense in this format. Now, okay, you might be saying, I don't fucking care. And that makes sense. Okay, no, I get it. Who cares that someone you know played a game kind of wrong? The issue is that, you know, people listen to them. In this thread, they tried to criticize the game. However, what they played was a mod. Seriously. They didn't play Half-Life 1 or anything, not even the normal Steam version. They played a mod. One that, sure, boasts that it's just like 1998 before listing all the changes it makes. Me and this person did not play the same game. Their criticism doesn't make sense. Even just the controller change has drastic consequences. Half-Life's tagline is run, think, shoot, live. Part of that thinking is understanding how, when, and where to use certain weapons, as they all serve unique purposes. You're supposed to treat encounters not just as shooting galleries, but almost like puzzles to some degree. Trial and error is also built into the game, as quick saving and quick loading is exceptionally easy, and that is by design. The ability to very quickly zip around your inventory is key to success in both planning and reacting on the fly. On a keyboard, this works. Your 1 to 5 keys, and of course the scroll wheel, act as perfect, snappy controls for your inventory, allowing you full access to all your items at a moment's notice. The combat is therefore built around this. Weapons, like the revolver, don't show their true utility until thought of in this way. The game's frantic and punishing shootouts don't really allow you time to steady and line up shots. However, if you combine the revolver with the SMG, then you can use it to run and gun and quickly deliver a final blow while you're already lined up perfectly, well before the soldier can even fully respond. You must effectively use traps. Look, I love Doom, but Half-Life is not more of a shooting gallery. That is just wrong. Yes, there is less exploration, but it is far from mindless. The tragedy of it all is that the controller functions. It delivers a close enough experience, but with enough minor issues that it all adds up to a much worse and definitely inauthentic playthrough. I played the version they did for this video. The controls are a lot closer to what you'd expect from a modern game, and that is not a good thing. It definitely tries its best with the inventory by having like 3 different ways to scroll through it, none of which are as snappy as either the scroll wheel or number buttons. One of the standouts was a lack of quick save and quick load. This already de-emphasizes experimentation and trial and error, and I'm starting to understand all the complaints they were making. See, Half-Life will let you get by using the SMG and shotgun, and if you're used to other shooters, you may even think this is how you're supposed to do things. It isn't. By disincentivizing experimentation and inventory management, it encourages relying on the easiest to use weapons. At that point, the HECU soldiers are no longer unpredictable oorah psychopaths, but brick walls with SMGs that you can trade damage with, and they can aim better than you can. So yeah, it's all hit scan based and doesn't have as many projectiles as Doom, but that's because it is a different game, which is supposed to be played in a very different way. A way you run the risk of automatically locking yourself out of by refusing to engage with it as it was intended. Also, it makes ladders worse. How? This isn't even to mention shit like how it makes crouching a toggle, which if you've never played Half-Life, just trust me on this, it ruins a pretty core part of the game's movement. Also, it adds 2 whole flashlight buttons. No quick load, but man, I gotta turn on my flashlight twice as hard. I don't mean to rag on this person. That isn't my point. It's just such a clear example of how what may seem like a minor preference has cascading consequences and can kinda render your criticism pointless and invalid. It's such a subtle issue, and you'd never know they were using a controller unless they said it themselves. You'd never know that the criticism you just read doesn't come from a mutual understanding of the same work. It's a mod. You can't naturally put this game on controller. When Half-Life got its only console port, they had to overhaul the entire aiming system, add Zelda-like Z-targeting to aid you. That's the thing. We all hate remasters, we all don't like art replacement, until it's the one we like. Until it so happens to fit our preferences specifically. That is the exception. I polled my audience about this, and while it isn't the largest sample size, we still got back a couple hundred responses. And this was the dominant one, that remasters are generally cringe slop. You know, there's good ones. I find some of the arguments very intriguing. Some argue that it's preservation, that remasters are better than remakes, because one brings an old game to new hardware and the other replaces a game with something else. While I'd like to agree and even understand the argument here, this is how it works from a company's perspective after all, but the difference between a remaster and a remake is that when a remake threatens to replace the original, that game gets more pushback, and even in general parlance, well, they're referred to as game name remake. Fuck, I wasn't supposed to talk about that one. Remasters get to replace games and fly essentially under the radar as long as they do it well enough and appeal that bit better to modern audiences. They get called the definitive versions, while remakes are often more controversial. This is why I consider them to be worse, because they subtly take over. When the inevitable PlayStation 6 version of Grand Theft Auto 5 comes out, will it be the PlayStation 3 original, or will it be based on the ray-traced, global illuminationed 240 FPS frame gen 2025 remaster, which is like the 5th fucking one, by the way. It is an accepted and even encouraged form of art replacement, sometimes literally. I chose GTA 5 on purpose because there is a literal, honest-to-God art installation that has been replaced by the remasters. Oh boy. And here's the kicker. I do this shit. For the longest time, I just assumed this is how things were supposed to work. The most convenient controls, the fanciest visuals, high resolutions, these were all the best. They were what to use as B-roll in my videos. Why did I start thinking this though? So many of the beliefs I held about games just kind of fall apart the second you ask, why? Why are modern controls better? Why is easier better? Why is high resolution better? Why do we need any of this? Like actually why? Look, this whole thing, my weird obsession with remakes and remasters, started with one channel. Prior to watching his videos, I don't think I really noticed. I was never a big remaster or even remake fan. I always thought there's something a little bit off about them, but for the most part, I just didn't think about it. Neryl's Majora's Mask 3D video changed that. It, for the first time, got me to actually consider what people could be missing out on, while still fully believing they experienced Majora's Mask. Thing is, as fun and interesting as that video is, the actual message, the thing that Neryl communicates, kinda sucks. Again, I like him, I think his videos are well made and funny and he seems like a cool guy, but also what the fuck are we doing here? Neryl has fully drank the truism Kool-Aid. So much of the channel is dedicated to fixing things, to improvements, to convenience. And for what? Neryl clearly loves Majora's Mask. Otherwise, why would he dedicate so much of his time, of his life, to it? But then also, why try to fix it? It doesn't need fixing. I'm not here to litigate whether Neryl's Majora's Mask HD pack is good. I don't really care. Hypothetically, it could be phenomenal, but what difference does it make? Why is it here? What is wrong with Majora's Mask? What is actually wrong with its textures, with its models, with its lighting? Nothing. There is nothing wrong with them. They are entirely functional. They are striking and atmospheric. What purpose does a higher resolution serve? It serves absolutely none. This is what I cannot wrap my head around. What benefit does increased complexity actually bring? What does it do? Neril is so uncomfortable with jagged lines or blurry visuals that he even suggests you use these AI upscaled texture packs for the Resident Evil games. While he acknowledges they are a bit scuffed, he still acts as though they're an improvement. He says it makes them more fun to revisit, and he's upset that the games weren't remade faithfully like Resident Evil 1. It just kind of sounds like he doesn't really like these games. Why ask for a remake? At the very least, at times like this, I can fall back on the pretentious hug box that is the video essayist community. Surely they'll be annoying enough to care about the artistic integrity of 480i, right? I left this to the end, hoping that if you're a drama-hungry bastard, that you'd have gotten bored by now. See, I want to talk about someone. Not just someone I like, but someone I really respect. Someone who helped me want to make video essays. I want to talk about Jacob Geller. I want to preface this by saying that I understand this video is now 5 years old. I don't know if Geller still believes this, but I haven't seen any form of correction or addendum or warning. I want to talk about his video on art restoration. Most of the video is fine. Hell, it's even things I've said. I like what remakes can do, how they can exist as adaptations. There are certain things only a remake can do. Though I perhaps don't like how he phrases it as though remakes cut out what didn't work with the original. That's just false.
You get a sense, playing the new Resident Evil 2, that these are design decisions that have been thought about for decades. Returning to it with a new lens means a new chance to think about why certain things in the game worked or didn't work, revisit it with modern sensibilities.
I am struggling to write this segment because I don't feel good about it. Because what I'm essentially doing is coming here and shitting all over a celebration, a success story. The story of the Resident Evil 4 HD project is fascinating. I will give it that. The amount of care and attention, the unique opportunities its creators were granted, Resident Evil 4 HD is the definition of a passion project. I think it's so neat to see a big video essayist highlighting the incredible work of random people. As an experiment, as a novelty, Resident Evil 4 HD really works. It is interesting to see, but as an improvement, as a remaster, I'm sorry, but it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't restore anything. When Geller talks about what is lost by making a game HD, I agree with him. The difference is our conclusion. Geller looks at this door, looks at how in the past it used to suggest something, but now in HD it is far more literal. You can just see what it is. Geller implies the solution to this problem is to change absolutely everything, that somehow you can get a more authentic experience by replacing every single texture. Change the models, change the lighting, change the environments. RE4 on PC supports 640 by 480, just letting you know, but if you have to play at the resolution your monitor is at, I would still argue that the original textures are more evocative. Yes, we are losing some of that magic in the jump from CRT to digital, but why take away more of the abstraction? Why make it more literal? This door is still quite unclear. Yes, you can see what the texture is, the very literal pixels that make it up, but you still have to use your brain to interpret what the texture is, what this door would be like. That is still on you. The HD project forces the interpretation of two presumably lovely guys, but they're not me. I understand that the HD project was made by tracking down a lot of the original places that were photographed. That is genuinely really cool and interesting, and recreating the textures from those fragments is very impressive. But it supposes that capturing reality was always the intention, when I just don't think you can prove that. It treats the source photographs that help create it as the authority on how we should view this fictional world, and there is no reason to assume that is the case. Also, there was one time where they misinterpreted a bag as being a bag of Cheerios, which, I mean, that's just funny. It is so interesting the way Geller has to talk about Resident Evil 4 to manufacture this point. The old textures are woof, despite working fine. He has to call the old stuff distracting, talk about botched lighting.
Like the best art restoration, it doesn't draw attention to itself. Instead, it pushes the years away, removes the distractions of muddy graphics and botched lighting.
Resident Evil 4 doesn't have botched lighting, it looks great. He may directly say that he knows it isn't actually restoration, yet the entire rest of the video contradicts that statement. All of it builds up to that idea, for a project that, again, while neat, represents something odd. This need to always replace, to pretend games can age. There is nothing to restore. There has never been a Resident Evil 4 that looked like this. There was never a time you could head to Capcom HQ and play a build that was this extreme. The project is very cool, but what does it accomplish? Nothing. Because there is no actual reason to believe that this is better. It's sharper, sure, but why does that matter? I guess that's what I want to hear from you. If you believe that particularly graphical remasters are good, why? Why is a shelf full of wine bottles actually better than a texture that suggests a shelf full of wine bottles? What does fidelity add to games that never had it, never needed it? Unless we believe that all games need to be chasing the same goal of replicating the clarity of the human eye or some shit. It stings a lot because I want to love the HD project. I don't want to be a dick. I just think the underlying ideology behind it is flawed. It is so much work, so much passion into a bunch of unnecessary changes that turn a 2 GB game into 50. Resident Evil 4 is maybe one of the most replaced games in history. That seems to happen whenever a game is beloved. Over the years, it has become more and more modernized. The current versions, PC, PS4, Switch, and Xbox, all use revamped controls that contort the game to a more standard and modern shape. It controls like any other shooter. Left trigger to raise your gun, move the right stick to aim, right trigger to shoot. It wasn't always like this. It used to have pretty different controls. PC is much the same, using modern-day WASD and mouse aim. You can at least change the controls back, but by default, they're the modern ones. They're what people are going to play. Why would they change it? The original controls are presented as an alternative setup. Who would think to change it back if they aren't already familiar with Resident Evil 4? Well, who cares? As long as it's good, replace away. For years, I had to hear people say that the Wii version was the definitive one. Why? Well, because it's the most frictionless. Even in comparison to mouse aim, the Wii version changes way more and does away with a lot of what felt clunky about the original, what made mastering it so satisfying. Instead, you have perfect aim and gyro. You're aiming with a cursor that tells you exactly when you'll hit, instead of the laser you had to pay more attention to. It also allows you to pre-line up your shots before you've even started aiming. The knife, a perfect example of skill expression in the original game, you can now pull out an auto lock on at a moment's notice. It's easier, it's more fun. It's not Resident Evil 4, and that's why it's the definitive version. Even when good, even when it's more fun, even when it isn't corporate, we still lose something. Remasters aren't preservation, they aren't restoration, they are replacement. And if you care about games, you shouldn't want that. I understand liking remasters. Everyone's right, the Wii version of Resident Evil 4 is super fun. So is the PC. The HD project looks pretty cool sometimes. I like some of the lighting in Resident Evil 1 HD. And, well, Wind Waker HD still burns my eyes, but hey, that's a unique experience at least. I just don't think these should ever be viewed as needed. We need to preserve the originals. Offer authentic ports or well-made emulation. Treat these changed games as interesting novelties, not needed improvements. Start respecting games even if you don't fully understand them. Even if they aren't intuitive. Even if they aren't the most fun. Even if they aren't for you. I'm going through Resident Evil 4 Remake withdrawals, man. I haven't talked about that game in like, I don't even know, 3 months? Oh god, I gotta get something out, gotta get this out of my system. Krauser!
I would just like to thank patrons Unitato, Stelly, Dasha, Dayglow, Goma, Nico, Saxon, It's June, Ewent, Not With Potential, App, and Sammy3D.
And Raspberry.
You made it just in time.
for their support. Mamma mia.
Also, in case anyone was worried, there's nothing in this case. I found this in a Walmart parking lot.